Also very pleased by the work that Ed Hirsch has done on behalf of our Adult Education Committee in making today possible. So Ed, thank you very much for your help and support. And of course, Ed Septimus, our chair of the Adult Ed Committee as well. Thank you, Ed, for all that you do. And we are really excited to have so many people with us this morning on Zoom. This is something that we've been able to enjoy through COVID to be able to learn how to do all of this. And we're still doing it, and that's good. It's a good thing to be able to have this available as a resource and as a tool, and to welcome professors and distinguished guests and rabbis like Rabbi Stephen Leon. So I'm going to introduce Rabbi Leon, and he'll take it from here. But first, again, thank you all for being here this morning. Rabbi Stephen Leon was born in Brooklyn, New York. He graduated from Columbia University, followed by the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. He received his rabbinic ordination from the Academy for Jewish Religion and served as their dean from 1974 through 1986. During those years, he served as the rabbi of the Elmwood Park Jewish Center in Elmwood Park, New Jersey. For the past 32 years, Rabbi Leon has been the spiritual leader of Congregation B'nai Zion in El Paso, and just recently became Rabbi Emeritus, Mazel Tov. He also taught in the Religious Studies Department of the University of Texas at El Paso, including Introduction to Judaism classes and courses on the Holocaust. Rabbi Leon has appeared on National Public Radio, on Channel 1 Israel Television, and has made numerous appearances on local television programs. Most relevant to this morning's program, Rabbi Leon spent his rabbinate helping B'nai Anusim, crypto-Jews of the Southwest, who have returned to their Jewish roots. Numerous articles regarding the important passion of Rabbi Leon has appeared in the New York Times, the Jerusalem Post, Jerusalem Report, Moment Magazine, Hadassah Magazine, and other periodicals. And as you entered this morning, we were listening to the music of Divan, a Ladino style of Jewish music that I'm sure Rabbi Leon is going to talk to us more about. Rabbi Leon has spoken on the subject of the crypto-Jews of the Southwest throughout the world, including Budapest and Cape Town, Barcelona, Toronto, Jerusalem, and throughout the United States. In 2014, he established the Anusim Center in El Paso, which is only one of 4 study centers in the world that provides information, resources, and cultural programs to educate the community about crypto-Jews who are returning to their Jewish roots. In 2017, he published his acclaimed book entitled The Third Commandment and the Return of the Anusim, a rabbi's memoir of an incredible people, which is available on Amazon. Rabbi Leon currently lives with his wife, Sharon, in El Paso, Texas. And if you're interested in learning more about this genre and what you can do, Rabbi Leon is going to share more information with you, but I know that he's also excited, and we're also excited to share more about the CCAR's recent publications that they're going to be translating the High Holiday Prayer books into Spanish as well. So if you're interested in learning more about that or ways you might help, be sure to let him know or let us know too. With that, Rabbi Leon, thank you again for being with us.
Well, thank you, Boker Tov. It's a pleasure, buenos dias, to be here. This is a wonderful opportunity together for us to learn right before the high holidays a little bit about a very important part of Judaism that a lot of people don't know about, and I think it's important that they do. So although there's a general topic here, I'm speaking more about the B'nai Anusim because I feel that while we know a lot about Sephardic Jewry, the phenomenon of B'nai Anusim does reach Texas, many congregations in Texas, but more specifically the border towns of Texas. So the question that I started is how and why are B'nai Anusim returning today? But let me first define that term. When I was in rabbinical school, and many of us in our own personal exploration of Jewish knowledge have learned of a term called Marano. Marano is a derogatory term coming from the root of pig or swine, and it was as I said, a negative term to give some definition to the victims of the Inquisition who kept their Judaism secret while they had converted openly to Christianity, more specifically to Catholicism. In more recent years, a more politically correct term in English is crypto-Jews, which means secret Jews. And in Hebrew, the most popular and politically correct term are anusim, or bnei anusim, the children of anusim. Now, the word anus in Hebrew, if you look it up in a Hebrew dictionary, means either someone who is raped, and I know that's quite an alarming term, or someone who is forced to do something against his or her will. And that's the story of the Bnei Anusim. Over 500 years ago, especially in Spain and Portugal and in many other communities in the world where there was a large Hispanic Jewish population, the Catholic Church forcibly converted hundreds of thousands of our people and forced them through torture devices, through expulsion, through persecution, confiscation of their property, and the worst of all, burning alive at the stake. Through those horrific methods, they were able to eliminate the Jewish population in great detail until they ultimately the expulsion from Spain in 1492. And this chapter, somewhat similar to the Holocaust in the fact that the elimination of Judaism was the goal of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella when they issued the Alhambra Decree. And the only difference is the time. More people, of course, are passionate about the Holocaust. Just the statistics of 6 million of our people, 1.5 million children perished, is a staggering figure. We still do not have as many Jews in the world here today in 2022 than we did in 1945. Very sad to know that. Less than 14 million Jews in the world today. It's sad. From the Inquisition's point of view, the difference was that the Catholic Church, rather than execute our ancestors, forcibly converted them and expelled them. A relatively small portion were actually burnt alive at the stake or died from the tortures. The majority forcibly were converted. And so what I learned from that term Marano is that the crypto Jews, the Bnei Anusim, are alive and coming back today. So let me tell you my story. During David's introduction, he mentioned I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I have a theory about that. I think that all Jews were born in Brooklyn, New York, but some of them don't admit it. Secondly, I was raised in the Northeast, in Bridgeport, Connecticut. My father, may he rest in peace, was a chazan of a conservative synagogue, Rodef Shalom, and that's where my roots were. From Brooklyn, we went to Connecticut. When I was ordained from the Academy for Jewish Religion, my first full-time pulpit was in New Jersey. And in New Jersey, I never, ever met a crypto Jew. I come to El Paso, Texas, August 1st, 1986. And in that very first week, something happens that has changed my life. The second day I was there, I received a phone call from a gentleman living on the border in Juarez, Mexico. Remember, El Paso, Texas is on the border of Mexico, specifically Juarez, which of course, in recent days, in recent years really, we know that there's a very strong drug cartel there. We also know there's a lot of crime there, sadly, but there's a lot of really, really incredibly great people, and there are no rabbis in Juarez. So this gentleman calls me on the phone, and he says, Rabbino, Spanish for rabbi. I didn't even know what it meant. He said, can I come and see you? And I said, sure, why not? And the next day he comes to me and he tells me the story. And the story is basically as follows. He is a religious Catholic. He grew up in a parochial school. He goes to church every Sunday. His family is very religious. especially his grandmother. And he said, and he was about 40 years old when he came to see me. He said that ever since he was a little boy, about 4 years old, he remembers that his grandmother would take him every Friday evening into a dark room of the house. She would light 2 candles and she would say a prayer in a language that he didn't understand. He said this had gone on through his entire life, and following the lighting of the candles, they would then go upstairs where they would join the rest of the family, and they've had a very large festive meal, and those 2 candles were put on the table. Said that his grandmother sadly passed away 2 weeks before he came to see me, and he was sure that the following week, his mother would be lighting the candles and continuing the tradition. She told him that she was not at all interested, and he was very frustrated. He thought it was so disrespectful to his grandmother. He could not get anyone in the family to continue that tradition, but he wouldn't let go of it. And so finally, he was directed to speak to his priest. He went to his priest in Juarez, and this I will never forget. It's impacted my life. The priest said to him, there are hundreds of Catholic women lighting candles Friday night. Now, I know why they're doing it, but out of respect to your grandmother, I recommend that you find a rabbi and ask the rabbi that question. If you can't find a rabbi, then come back to me. Well, as I said before, there's no rabbis in Juarez, and so the gentleman came to see me. Why me? Coincidental? Perhaps. I was the new rabbi in town. I only was there a short period of time, a couple of days when he calls me. And when he told me that story, honestly, it didn't resonate with me as it does today, because it was just the beginning of my journey and his journey to some extent. And I said to him, sir, have you ever heard of the Spanish Inquisition? And he said, no. I told him a little bit about it. And I said, but it's very possible that your grandmother has roots from Spain, and she was carrying on a tradition that maybe her mother or her grandmother was doing, and it's a Jewish tradition. And he was flabbergasted. It's a Jewish tradition. Why would my grandmother be doing this tradition? And anyway, we went on for a brief time after that. And then he said to me, can I come to your synagogue? And I said to him, of course, anyone may come to my synagogue. He started coming a few times. He really wasn't interested that much. However, you know, in a little while, we will be observing Rosh Hashanah followed by Yom Kippur. This gentleman, from that time, that meeting until today, comes to my synagogue every Yom Kippur, and he stays there the entire day. No one says anything to him, and occasionally he and I look at each other, and I know why he's there. It's his form of atonement for not carrying on that tradition of his grandmother. Okay, 2 days later, I get a call from an attorney in El Paso, Texas, and she wants to speak to me on the phone. Sure, what is it about? She said, well, my sister just passed away, religious Catholic. We had a mass. She was buried in the Catholic cemetery. When I returned from the cemetery to her home, my nieces, her children, were sitting on low benches. All of the mirrors were covered, and they were eating round objects. I had never seen this before. I said to my nieces, why are you doing this? And they said, our mother, and she's my sister, yeah, our mother told us that we have Jewish roots. And out of respect for her ancestry, whenever anyone died in the family, she would carry on these traditions. This person that called me, this attorney, said, I never heard of it. I said, well, this is why we're doing it. Well, what do these traditions mean? I have no idea. And so I explained to her the traditions. Well, now I'm in El Paso less than a week, and the third event happens. You know, so we Jews somehow have some kind of a superstition of things happen in threes. You know, like we have 3 aliyot during the week. You need 3 to bench after Birkat. The number 3 is traditional, you know? And so the third event happens, and this is the strangest of all. When I left El Paso, when I left Elmwood Park, New Jersey, as a joke, the community gave me a little sign. It's still on my fireplace today, and it says, Shalom Ya'al. Now, you do not say Shalom Ya'al in New Jersey. That's not the way we speak in New Jersey. We might say use, but we don't say Ya'al. At any rate, we were having cable television put into our home, and the cable guy comes, and I don't mean Jim Carrey. I mean a cable man comes in, he sees the sign, Shalom Ya'al, and he says to me, do you mind asking, are you Jewish? I said, not only am I Jewish, I'm a rabbi. He says, I'm Jewish too, and he opens up his shirt, and he's wearing one of these large gold Magen Davids, this Jewish star. And I said, really, you're Jewish too? I said to him, and this man was in his 20s, I said to him, what synagogue do you go to? He says, I haven't decided yet. I said, why haven't you decided yet? He said, I just found out I was Jewish. I said, how did you find out you were Jewish? He says, well, about a month ago, my grandmother calls up all of her grandchildren. She has 10 grandchildren. And she says, I got to talk to you guys. So please come over. Now, my grandmother wasn't ill. She was elderly, but she wasn't ill. And we all come over. We love our grandmother. And she says to us, I have to show you something. She goes under the bed and she brings out a box. And in the box, coincidentally, she has 10 objects, all Jewish objects. He did not know what these objects necessarily meant. And she tried to explain them. And she said to her grandchildren, you know, this was given to me by my grandfather. And I have been keeping this all along, and I've not told anyone about it, but he told me about our Jewish roots going back to Spain. And he told me to keep this safe and don't let anything happen to them. And of course, you guys know I'm a religious Catholic. However, I decided that who knows, you know, what the future lies in store for me. I want to share this with you. I don't want them to find this box and perhaps just throw it out or something. So I want each one of you to pick one of these objects, and I'll tell you what the objects mean as he told me what they mean. And that basically was the end of that part. So this gentleman picked the Jewish star. Now, 3 events like that going on in such a short period of time, I'm saying, where am I? What is this El Paso community all about? And I started to do some research. I tried to find, there was the Rabbi Emeritus of the Reformed Temple Mount Sinai in El Paso had written a book called Roots and Boots. And it was about the Jewish community and how it came to El Paso, Texas, and where it came from. But in the book, he didn't mention anything about crypto Jews. And so I met with him and I asked him, and he said, to be honest with you, it isn't really a big deal with me, but there is a rabbi in Phoenix. His name is Rabbi Plotkin. And I know that he has some crypto Jews in his congregation. Why don't you call him? So I called Rabbi Plotkin. And when I spoke to Rabbi Plotkin, he did say that there are a few people that he has converted them to Judaism and they are part of his congregation. But I could not find any other information, truthfully, until there was a conference in El Paso run by an organization called the Society for Crypto-Judaic Studies, which still exists today. And the main speaker at that, there were 2 speakers that had a big impression on me. One was a Rabbi Joshua Stemfer, may he rest in peace, who was a rabbi in Portland, who had been working with crypto Jews, and a man by the name of Stanley Hortis, who is an expert on the crypto Jewish community of New Mexico. And I learned from them the reality and the existence of crypto Jews in the Southwest, and that piqued my interest even more. About as I continued my journey in El Paso, I began to encounter more and more people with this background. I'll give you another story. There was a Christian minister, her first name was Trina, and we had done a number of interfaith activities together. And about 5 years after I'm in El Paso, she calls me up and says, I have to talk to you about something. It's been on my mind. And I said, okay, fine. She comes into my office and she starts crying hysterically, but I mean hysterically. I can't stop her. I said, Trina, what is going on? She says, I have to tell you something. I can't tell this to anyone else. I said, okay. And with that, she opens up the top of her blouse, which she had a button there, and she's wearing a Jewish star, a little Jewish star. And she says to me, you know, and this woman is blonde and blue-eyed. Her ancestry is from Scandinavia. Her husband is also a minister. Her children go to parochial school. And she says to me, you know, throughout my life, when our family would get together, whether it was a family reunion, whether it was Christmas, Thanksgiving, within that family, there were always people who didn't look like I do. They were darker, they had dark hair, and they had accents, and they spoke Spanish, and they were Hispanic. And I asked about it, but I didn't find out a great deal of information, and we were always friendly. Again, a story of someone about to die. She says, again, a few weeks ago, my mother, religious Christian, Protestant, calls me and my sister to her bedside. And she says, you know, I'm very sick. I'm not going to be lasting much longer. And I want to give you something. And she takes out these 2 Jewish stars and she gives one to her sister and one to her. And she says, in our family, you remember that Hispanic group of people, that was from my grandfather's side that you never met. He had died before you guys were born. And I want you to know that he was Jewish and that these Jewish stars were in his family. And I want each one of you to wear them and wear them proudly. And then she starts crying again. I said, Trina, why are you crying? And she says, I'm crying because I feel that I have betrayed my people. I said, how have you betrayed your people? She said, my whole goal in life is to bring people to Jesus, to embrace and to love Jesus. And among those people that I have done that, that I have brought to Jesus, probably there have been some Jewish people. And I shouldn't have done that. The Inquisition did that. And I feel horrible for doing that. And I said to her, Trina, you're a wonderful person. This is your passion, is to bring people to Jesus. And continue what you're doing, and you don't have to feel bad about it. And she hugged me and she left. Let me tell you one more story, because this is the one that really had the biggest impression on this journey and why I feel that I have to do it. I would say about 10 or 11 years ago, my secretary says to me, there were 3 people in your outer office, an elderly woman, her daughter and son-in-law, and they asked if they could come in and speak with you. And I said, sure. The elderly woman, I would say, was in her 90s. She sits down right in front of me, and her daughter says, okay, Mom, we're here. And she says, Rabbi, I just have to tell you something. We live in Los Angeles, and we went to San Antonio for my son's graduation from college. This is my mother, was her grandson's graduation. We wouldn't miss it for the world. And we drive from Los Angeles to San Antonio. And on the way home, as we're passing through the El Paso exit, all of a sudden, my mother says to me, you have to stop and you have to find a Jewish religious person. Now, this woman is telling me the story, and she said, so we got off of the exit. We went to a service station, said, is there a synagogue around? And they have directed me to your synagogue. And now she said, Mom, tell the rabbi and tell me, why are we here? And the woman says to me that her grandfather had passed away a number of years ago. And before he passed away, He brought her into a room and he said to her, I'm going to die soon. And I want you to know about our Jewish roots. And he said, every morning I would put on an object. There were two objects and they have religious scrolls in them. One was on my arm and one was on my head. And you have to promise me two things. When I die, when no one is looking, because it's going to be a Catholic funeral, you're going to take one of these objects and you're going to put it in the coffin with me. And secondly, when you die, you're going to take the other object and you're going to have it buried with you. You're going to tell the same story to your children so that it will be buried with you. Because this was worn by my grandfather. And it went on for generations and generations. And it would be disrespectful to our ancestry, the Jewish people, if these objects did not find a place, a sacred place to be buried. So the woman said she has this object now for 40 years. And she has not slept for 40 years because she can't sleep because she's not Jewish. She embraces Jesus with all her heart and soul. She does not have the same spiritual feeling for Judaism that she should. And she said, last night when we were in the hotel in San Antonio, my grandfather came to me in a dream. And he says, I know you haven't been able to sleep. He said, but I'm going to make a deal with you. If you promise me that you will find a religious Jewish person and he agrees to take this object and bury it, this object that you've been carrying along, and he will bury it, I will release you from that promise. And she said, last night, my grandfather and I had a deal. And Rabbi, you're going to fulfill that deal. And she said, I slept for the first time. And with that, she took out this object, and I'm going to show it to you. This is a tefillin, has a scroll. This tefillin had been in her pocketbook for 40 years. She takes it out of her pocketbook. She takes my hands. She starts crying. And she says, Rabbi, in this synagogue right now, will you promise that when you die, you will bury this with you? And I said to her, of course I will promise this to you. And I have carried this with me as my possession, and I've left instructions that this will be buried with me when I die. Now, think about this. There are hundreds of rabbis in California. Why did this happen to me? Why did this happen at this time? There's nothing magical about me. But this leads into my next story. This story of the tefillin is an incredible story. It would sound like something you would make up. I do believe, I'm talking to a group of people connected to a synagogue. I do believe that Hashem, that God, somehow has connected this with me. So now I'm going to tell you a story. And after I tell you this story, you're really going to think that there's something wrong with me. Mishugas. I mentioned before briefly about the Holocaust. I want to tell you something that I had a conversation with God. Now, when I say I have a conversation with God, I'm not telling you that it's a conversation that you and I are having on Zoom or one that you would have in a regular, normal conversation. I don't know how God spoke to me. But one day I said to God, God, we're doing great as a Jewish people. The first thing you told Abraham was to go to Israel. Israel is flourishing today. Israel is doing so much. It's advancing so much. It's helping the world. You also said that we would be freed from Egyptian bondage, and we were freed from Egyptian bondage. And yes, we suffered during the Holocaust. But God, one of the promises that you made to Abraham, and then you made it to Isaac and to Jacob and to all of the patriarchs of our people, you said that we would be numerous as the sands of the sea and the stars in the sky. And God, we're not. We haven't even replaced the 6 million that were killed. And God said to me, I did not build the crematorium. I did not build the gas chambers. I did not kill 6 million of our people, 1.5 million of our children. Evil people did that. And we can't bring them back. However, he said 500 years ago, in my name, evil people did evil things to my people in my name. They who believed that Jesus was my son forget that Jesus said, turn the other cheek. The only thing that Jesus didn't believe in the Torah was an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. He said, no, turn the other cheek. And then they did all of these violent acts to my people to bring them to Jesus instead of bringing them to me. And he said, most of those people are alive today. And most of those people, once they learn of their heritage, will want to return to their Jewish roots. And he said, and now if you want to work with me, once you bring back those people, we will be as numerous as the sands of the sea and the stars in the sky. And that was the end of that discussion. And that has been my passion. And that number, even though, you know, when we think of statistics, 6 million, it kind of makes the whole thing impersonal. But the fact of the case is that you have to think about statistics when you think about Jewish survival today, when you think about the rise of anti-Semitism today, when you think about the fact that we haven't replenished the number of people that we're losing people to apathy in the Jewish community, all of these factors. And then I say to myself, we can bring these back. And so statistically, I was at a conference in San Francisco by a group called B'chol Hashon, and the speaker was talking about Jewish survival. And at the end of his speech, he was a sociologist. He said that if there was never a Holocaust, there would be, instead of 14 million Jews in the world, there'd be 40 million Jews in the world. And I said to him after the conference, because it stuck with me, I said to him, if there was never a Spanish Inquisition, how many Jews do you think there would be in the world today? And he looked at me and he said, you know, no one has ever asked me that question. He said, I don't know. He said, get back to me. I'll do some research. I wouldn't let it go. I called him several times. Finally, about a month later, he said, well, I would guess there'd be maybe 100 million. That number stuck with me too. There was a conference in Israel in 2016. It was the first conference in Israel, and it took place at the Knesset, in fact, and it had to do with crypto Jews and the return of crypto Jews. And one of the leaders of the conference was Natan Sharansky. If you remember him, he was one of the refuseniks from the Soviet Union who was arrested. Anatoly Sharansky was his name then. Finally, when the Jews were allowed to leave the Soviet Union, he came to Israel, and he now works in the government. And one of the things he works in is in immigration. And so he was one of the people that headed this caucus on crypto Jews. I wasn't able to attend, but I was able to Zoom all of the meetings. And I was able to have them read a letter from me in support of what they were doing. And in one of the lectures, a historian got up in front of this entire group at the Knesset, and he said that if there was never a Spanish Inquisition, if there was not a persecution of the Jews in Spain and Portugal and in many other countries, he, off the top of his head, said there are 100 million Jews in the world today that don't even know it, all in the Hispanic community. And then in the Q&A, another professor from the United States got up there and he said, you know, sir, your figures are not enough. In my research, and then he talked all about DNA research and he talked about archaeological discoveries and discoveries of records of weddings and divorces that took place at the time of the Inquisition, written in Ladino. He said, my research says you're very conservative. It's between 100 and 200 million people in the world. He says in Brazil alone, 25% of that population has Jewish roots. And so I say to you today, this is an incredible story. It's an incredible story. There is a potential in this world today to have between 100 and 200 million people learn about their Jewish roots and then return if they want to return. I want to tell you one other story and then move on. In a few days, on the holiday of Sukkot, I will observe the 65th anniversary of my bar mitzvah. My bar mitzvah took place on the Shabbat of Sukkot. The English day, however, was October 12th, Columbus Day. Before all of the controversy in recent days about Columbus and taking down Columbus's statue, etc., Columbus was my hero. If it wasn't for Columbus, we would not have America. I mean, that's what I taught. That's what I was taught. That's what I learned. And so I was very proud that on Columbus Day and on Sukkot was my bar mitzvah. And before my bar mitzvah, I went to my grandfather, my Zaidi, who came from Grodno, Poland. And I said to him, Zaidi, you know what? We've never really talked about your background. I know that you left Poland before the Holocaust, but I didn't really learn a great deal about where you came from before that. And he starts crying. I said, why are you crying? He says, Stevela, that's what he called me, Stevela. He said, when I had my bar mitzvah in Poland, I asked the same question to my grandfather. And my grandfather said to me, and by the way, my grandfather's name was Morris Leon. My grandfather said, he's telling me that his grandfather said to him, you know, we go back. We have a tradition in our family to name after the living, not after the deceased. Ashkenazic Jews have a tradition. You can't name after, it's bad luck to name after a living relative. You have to name after a deceased relative. It's the opposite in the Sephardic community. In the Sephardic community, they believe that you honor people who are still alive. He said, when you were born, and he said, even though, by my grandfather, now going back to what he's telling me, when he came to the United States and he went through Ellis Island from Poland, his name was Moshe Leon, but they anglicized it to Morris Leon. So his grandfather at his bar mitzvah was telling him, you're Moshe Leon, you were named after me, I'm still alive. I was named after my grandfather. He was named after his grandfather. He said, do you know that in our family, we believe that we go back to the 13th century. And there was a very famous rabbi in Spain. His name was Moshe de Leon, Moshe of Leon, of the city of Leon, Moshe de Leon. And he became the founder of the Zohar, the writer of the Zohar and the founder of Kabbalah. And I could not, I mean, that story was in the back of my mind until I got all involved with B'nai Anasim. And through the story of the Tefillin, and through the story of my conversation with Hashem, and through the story of Trina, who had that little Jewish necklace, even though she felt she was betraying her people, I realized that why I do what I do has to do with Hashem. Now, one of the things that's always bothered me, however, is what are the ramifications of someone who wants to return to Judaism if they're observing any form of Christianity, especially Catholicism? So it so happened that one day I'm invited to a church of the Nazarene in El Paso, and the pastor, who was I thought was a friend of mine, told me he wanted me on a Sunday to come and talk about Judaism. not about crypto Jews, about Judaism. And I gave my talk, and then I go back to my seat. And then he gives a sermon, and it's all about the responsibility that Christians have for not doing more to save Jews during the Holocaust. And I'm listening, and he starts crying at the end of his speech. And he says, Rabbi Leon, the real reason I had you here today is I want you to forgive me because I did not do enough to save your people during the Holocaust. Well, I wasn't prepared for that question. And honestly, I did not know of anyone directly related to me that died during the Holocaust, as passionate as I am about it. So I didn't know what to do. So I said, no, I would rather not, well, didn't have a choice. His wife comes over to me and hands the microphone to me. And I said to him, you know what, you have nothing to apologize for. You didn't kill anybody. You were not responsible for the indifference of the church during the Inquisition. During the Holocaust, it wasn't the church, it was the Nazis. And I said, to be honest with you, I can't forgive you. If you want to find a second generation Holocaust survivor and ask them to forgive you, that's fine. But I appreciate, what you've said. And that was the end of that. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to have a conversation. This gentleman sounds really, really sincere. So we went out to lunch. And I said, I have to ask you a question. If someone in your church said to you, I have learned that I might have some Jewish roots, and I would like to explore them, just explore them. Maybe talk to a rabbi, maybe go to a synagogue. I said to him, what would you say to that person in your church? Without batting an eyelash, he says to me, I would tell him no. And I said, why? He said, because suppose he did find out he had Jewish roots. I have saved his soul. If he goes back to Judaism now, he's doomed. And we're sitting here eating, and and I'm saying to myself, I said to him, thank you so much for being very frank with me. I really appreciate it. Now I have a better understanding of who you are. I said that on the outside. On the inside, I said, you bigot, you still think the Jews are going to hell? Whatever our morality is, you think we're going to hell? I said, that's the last lunch I'll ever have with you. So happens, a few years later, I had the opportunity to have a private audience with the Cardinal of Paris. His name was Jean-Marie Lustiger. My good friend in El Paso, Father Monsignor Frank Smith, may he rest in peace, made this arrangement. We were visiting Paris, my wife and I wanted to meet this Jewish cardinal. He was raised in France. His name was Jean-Marie Lustiger, and his mother died in Auschwitz. He was a Jew. But in order to save him, way before, obviously, his mother died, she enrolled him in a Catholic school to hide his Jewishness. He always wanted to be an educator. And he made it good. He made it so good that he became a devout Catholic and rose in the ranks in the Catholic hierarchy. In fact, after Benedictine retired, if you remember, Jean-Marie Lustiger was actually one of the people that was being considered to be in the running to be the new Pope. Unfortunately, because of his Jewish roots, it never happened. Never made it to being one of those considered. So I was anxious to speak with this gentleman, and we spoke, and I told him why I was there, and told him a little bit about my background. And he said to him, and I said to him, "Can I ask you a question?" I asked him the same question I asked that minister of the Nazarene Church. I said, if someone comes to you and says that they are interested in exploring their Jewish roots, what would you say to them? And he took my hand and he said, I would say to them, let God lead you on the proper path. And I said to him, I said, this man is a mensch. And then we went on and we started literally kibitzing. He spoke a little bit of Yiddish. He told me that he's the only one in his family that actually observed Catholicism. His sister did not. And he told me he has used this term. He says, I still have mishpacha in California, and I've been to bar mitzvahs and everything else. And he said, I'll tell you, the reason that I came to Jesus, he said, was because of what I went through. I saw all of the hatred that the Nazis were able to put up on people. And in my personal belief, the only resistance to the Nazis is what Jesus taught, and that is to turn the other cheek. And so we had this conversation, and then I realized that in a quiet way, I even have the endorsement of a Cardinal of Paris for what I do. One of the ways in which we are able to spread the word about the B'nai Anosim are through meetings like this. As David said at the outset, I have had the privilege of speaking in many countries. Let me tell you another quick story. I also have been, until I retired, I was teaching a course at UTEP. The course was Introduction to Judaism and the Holocaust and crypto Jews. So it was almost Hanukkah, and I was telling the class a story about the dreidel and explaining to them. All of a sudden, one of my students in UTEP, and by the way, in that class, 98% of the students were not Jewish. And I always felt I was doing a mitzvah by teaching this class. So I took out the dreidel and I explained the four symbols. Great miracle happened there. And this girl in the class, she says, I have one of those. And she takes this out. Let me show you this. This in Spanish is called toma todo. It says it right here. Toma todo. It's a 6-sided dreidel. You spin it just like a dreidel. I found out that this is a game that's played in Mexico. I found out later it's played in many cultures. And I was thinking to myself, and this, I can't say that I have the proof of it, but I could just imagine as Christmas, and you know, Christmas and Hanukkah often are very close to one another, not always. They have separate meanings, of course, but could you imagine if you were hiding your Jewish identity and it's Christmas and you want to hold on to something? The dreidel, the sivivon, is the symbol, the ritual symbol, that and the Hanukkah menorah, the Chanukiah, which most associates us with Hanukkah. And I have this feeling that somehow the crypto Jews invented this toma todo. Again, I can't prove it, so that they could carry on that tradition without being persecuted for it. By the way, I did want to take this opportunity to sing at least one Ladino song, and it is a Hanukkah song. It's called Ocho Candelicas, and I'm going to sing it right now. Hanukkah linda está aquí, ocho candelas para mí. Hanukkah linda está aquí, ocho candelas para mí. Oh, una candelica, dos candelicas, tres candelicas, cuatro candelicas, cinco candelicas, seis candelicas, siete candelicas, ocho candelas para mí. Now, as I'm looking at the clock, I see I'm really closing in on my time, and I said I would give some time for questions, and so I'm going to fast forward to the future. In 2014, we opened an Anosim Center in El Paso. We actually were able to take over the old El Paso Holocaust Museum, a very fitting place. It was given to us. And then because of COVID and because of certain circumstances, that Anosim Center no longer exists. But we just started a new Anosim Center a few miles from El Paso in southern part New Mexico. And we just did something that I think is going to have an impact on the Jewish community. We are now having it as a synagogue as well as a study center. We now have a synagogue in Ohio that unfortunately has to close its doors, has donated to us a Torah. On Tisha B'Av, we had a service at our new location. More than 50 people showed up for the service, which was in Hebrew, Spanish, Ladino, and English. We would, and Zooming it or live streaming it, we had another 40 people. Tisha B'Av, that's an incredible amount of people that came. We will be having on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur a 1-hour service. We will not be competing with the established synagogues. We don't want to have any ramifications, but we are the only synagogue that I know of, at least in the States, that will have services not strictly, but inviting the B'nai Anosim to come, and so that they will feel welcome, where sometimes because of the language barrier and other things, they don't feel welcome everywhere else. Once again, let me, I have to just get to the very last point. Getting back to Tisha B'Av. On Tisha B'Av, as you know, in all synagogues that have services, they emphasize the 6 million that were killed, but most importantly, the fact that the destruction of the 2 temples both took place on the 9th day of Av. In 2009, I attended the United Synagogue Conservative Judaism conference in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, where at that point every year they would have a conference and they'd have resolutions that would have to do with, let's say, Iranian Jews, anti-Semitism, the Jewish position on abortion, etc. I brought up a resolution which passed unanimously. And to me, that has changed Jewish history in the United States, because that resolution said, and I'm just going to make it shorter because we have a time factor right now where I've already gone over my limit, but I want to end with this. It said that the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism recommends that all of its synagogues on holiday of Tisha B'Av not only talk about the Holocaust and not only talk about the destruction of the temples, but emphasize the expulsion of the Jews from Spain on Tisha B'Av in 1492, and to have study programs and musical programs and bring in speakers and films about crypto-Jews so that people in congregations, all of the conservative congregations, learn about it. And in addition, that all of the conservative synagogues in the world, there's over 700 of them, will have on Tisha B'Av, will welcome back crypto-Jews to their congregation. And so, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. I'll leave it up to, I see David is back. I'm sorry, David, I only left 3 minutes for questions, but if you want me to stay on a little bit longer, I am more than happy to do so.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for helping us understand this history so beautifully. I really appreciated so much of what you had to share, including it reminded me of a member. This goes to one of the questions in the chat, that we have a member of the congregation who grew up just with their grandmother lighting candles on Friday nights. They had no idea why or what the purpose of it was, but her grandmother did it and her grandmother did it. And so it was something that they just continued doing. And he discovered his Judaism through that experience and continued to learn and grow and be part of the community. One question here is how are we getting the word out to others and letting the others in the community know about their Jewish lineage and have an opportunity to learn and join with you?
Well, you know, through these types of speaking engagements, there's also 2 films that have come out recently. One on PBS called A Long Journey, and another one called Children of the Inquisition. If you can find them certainly on the PBS site, you can find it in the archives, and it does tell the story. There's an awful lot that can be done. In fact, I would answer, as you know, we rabbis tend to do, answer a question with a question. How can you help me? How can we help to get this word out? Because I'm telling you, people don't understand that this phenomenon of the return of is a reality. And I'm not exaggerating, there are between 100 and 200 million people from the Hispanic community that have Jewish roots.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for joining us and being part of this adult education program. Thank you to our members of the Adult Education Committee, to Ed Hirsch, who helped chair today's program, to Ed Septimus and others who are part of the committee. If you have other ideas or suggestions of future programs, please let them know. Please let us know. We'd love to continue learning and exploring these topics together with you. Just a note about a few events coming up between now and Rosh Hashanah. On Tuesday night, we have our High Holiday Workshop. So if you're interested in learning more about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that's 7:00 p.m. Tuesday night on Zoom. Also, Wednesday morning is our next Kids Meals event, where we'll be gathering in the Wolf Tomb Hall to make sandwiches and lunches for preschool-age children, as well as the book review. The Shaktel Library Readers Group will be meeting on Wednesday afternoon at 1:00 as well. So a lot to do between now and Rosh Hashanah, but if we don't see you, we hope to see you then, and wishing everybody a Shana Tova, a good, healthy, and happy year. Thank you again, Rabbi Leon.
Thank you, and Shana Tova to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
David.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, David.
It was a wonderful program.
Thank you.
Fascinating.
All right, I'm going to say goodbye.
Great. Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye, Rabbi. Thank you,
Thank you,
Shana Tova.
Rabbi. A blessing on your Kepola. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Hitraot. Bye.